Today we take a look at dry brushing, an easy way to get highlights on textured surfaces and sometimes an alternative to edge highlighting. What up, many people? Dry brushing, when compared to last week's video, is a pretty simple technique to tackle. It's best used on highly textured surfaces like chainmails and furs, but with a little consideration, it can be used on all kinds of surfaces. So what does one need to accomplish dry brushing? Honestly, not a whole lot. First and foremost, we need an old or a cheap brush. Dry brushing is kind of a harsh technique, and we wouldn't want to spoil our expensive, nice brushes. You can find cheaper brushes at art supply stores. For dry brushing, I prefer to use flat bristle brushes as opposed to round bristle brushes, but honestly, you can use whatever you prefer. Next, we need some paint. Honestly, any paint will do, but I know that Games Workshop makes a dry paint that's specifically for dry brushing that may be worth looking into. Essentially, it's just a dry acrylic paint. Finally, our last ingredient is paper towel. Pretty simple. The first step is to ensure that both the brush and paper towel are completely dry. It's called dry brushing after all, not wet brushing. Take the paint straight out of the pot, no thinning is required for this strategy, and wipe off the majority of the paint on your paper towel. Your goal is to remove the majority of the moisture from the paint so that most of the dry pigments of the paint are left behind. Then, lightly brush with the tips of the bristles against the details of the model. You'll start to see paint slowly collect on the edges. You can keep dry brushing the same area until you've built up a good enough of a highlight. Then, just like layering, you can build up a brighter dry brush layer. I took a little bit of white and added it to my original base tone and dry brushed the uppermost regions of the model. It's hard to remove a dry brushing layer other than by painting over it and restarting, so go slowly and build up a gradual effect. Dry brushing can be an aggressive application of paint, so if your model has little weak bits, support them with the finger so they don't snap. One place you can mess up with dry brushing is having too much paint on your brush. You can test the brush by running it along your thumb. If too much paint is catching on the texture of your thumb, wipe more off. As you can see, this kind of dry brushing is a messy tactic. If you know that your painting plan for your miniature includes dry brushing, it may be a good idea to do the dry brushing part first so you don't affect other parts of the model. However, if you do have a few coats of paint on the miniature and you still want to dry brush some small detail, just grab a smaller dry brush so you can confine the effect of the dry brushing to a smaller area. The results are dusty looking, and this can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what you're going for. In this case, I was painting on a wooden texture, a dryad, so a rougher looking finish was okay. The more textured the surface is, the more of that dry brushing grain is kind of hidden, which is why this tactic is really suited for things like fur and chainmail, as aforementioned. Sometimes you want your miniature to look kind of dusty and weathered, and dry brushing can get you that effect pretty quickly. But what if you want to use dry brushing, but you don't want that dusty effect? Earlier in the video, I teased that dry brushing can sort of be a replacement for edge highlighting. Well, go grab a smaller brush and focus your dry brushing efforts on the edges of the model. In this case, I have a black miniature, so I started with a dark gray dry brush and then went to a brighter gray. The end result, again, is a little dusty looking. However, we can take some wash and apply it like we did in the shading video, and this will knock back some of that dusty look. As mentioned in the shading video, shade sinks to the recesses, but leaves the edges alone, preserving our pseudo edge highlight. Does this look as good as normal edge highlighting? No, but it comes in a fraction of the time and doesn't require the steadiness of a bomb diffuser. Just a quick tip, if you find yourself having to wait for a dry brush to dry because you cleaned it earlier with water, don't forget that hair dryers can make pretty short work of drying things. But note, you shouldn't do this to your normal, nicer brushes. Congrats, you're now a professional at dry brushing, and you can save so much time with dry brushing literally all of your miniatures. And you know what you should do with that time? You should share this video. Shameless plug. And now for our community highlight time. This week we have Hordes models from the Reddit user Jekka28. Specifically, Circle Ouroboros, Pureblood Warpwolf, Gorax, and Shadowhorn Satyr. I love the golden decoration on the base trim. It really takes advantage of the entire surface area of the model. You can also see all the layers of gray she put onto the flesh, really developing it as much as she could. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you know a mini man or woman who could benefit from the information in this video, please share it with him or her. And until next time, don't forget to paint more minis. Edge highlighting with pastel pink. I mean, I love pink as much as the next guy, but I'm going to be choosing a pastel orange instead of pink. Finally, we want to shoot attempts to blend the shade in the base coat, as blending it can be quite difficult. All we want to do is cover up the wash stain line. We don't want to cover all of the shade, obviously. Today we take a look at, I want to say edge highlighting. I already did that video. Don't Make sound. Get this dog out of here. Crusher, come on. Back to our regularly scheduled show. We've made no progress. That was pretty sexy. You're a wank. Oh, I was containing that burp for that entire part, and that was terrible.